All right, continuation of the introduction. So we said what psychology was. Now we need to mention what psychological disorders are, which is kind of the whole point of this class. And this is where, again, you're looking at behavioral, psychological, cognitive, physiological, all that related, all those different symptoms that are going to occur in patterns, cause distress, and interfere with activities of daily life. So it can't just be that someone is having some little symptom, they're mildly depressed, or they're not adjusting to some situation without the other bullet points here. It's all a package. It needs to occur in patterns. So if you see something one time that's odd, that does not mean you have a disorder. That does not mean you have something that has to be addressed. It's just maybe one time under some major stress, you thought you heard a voice. And that's not as uncommon as you would imagine, and that does not necessarily mean anything. It's just that if it becomes a pattern and on a regular basis you start to hear a voice, then we might have some concerns. Causing distress to you. If something you're doing doesn't cause you distress, that may or may not be a disorder. And then it needs to also interfere with activities of daily life. Activities of daily life are like being able to get your clothes on, to go to the grocery store and find food for yourself, to get to work, to function at work. If something is in the way, like if you have obsessive compulsive disorder and have to wash your hands so many times each morning that you can't open the door to get out to your car without having to rewash your hands, and then over and over and over, that is interfering with your activities of daily life. And more often than not, it's surely causing distress, and it's occurring in patterns, and it's behavioral and psychological symptoms, and then therefore it's a psychological disorder. So don't leave this class, don't think in your daily life about every little thing that you do and start stressing out, oh no, I think I have every disorder in every chapter. It needs to occur in patterns, and needs to occur over time. Other phrases for psychological disorders: somebody might say they have a mental disorder, a mental health disorder, a mental health issue. Those are other words. Maybe it's nicer to say mental health concerns. It just sounds more pleasant. But psychological disorders is perfectly acceptable. Just don't use the word crazy or something like that. You know, that's not professional, and it's not helpful, and it does nothing to further the information. Abnormal psychology and or psychopathology. This is kind of the branch or the type of psychology that's studying the psychological disorders we just talked about. Some people would argue with the word abnormal, that that's not fair, but in our current understanding, we still do think of it as that. So take a pause here and then think about, what are you already aware of, even if you haven't looked at the book, or even if you did look at the book. Who are people, or what are experiences you've had in your life that are connected with psychological concerns that you've had experience with? I'm sure there's been one or two different situations. I want to say just a couple things about prevalence rates. So how often do these occur? In 2005, a study had 9,000 respondents, and 1 in 4 reported that they had previously experienced a psychological disorder in the past year. That, to me, sounds like a large number. Now, you may think that seems unrealistic, and with these studies, when people are responding, you never know for sure if it's true, but odds are what they're saying is they were feeling bad about something at some point. There was something really bothering them, whether it was an adjustment disorder or depression or some anxiety or some other thing, ADHD, things like that. They were acknowledging that there were concerns and it was bothering them, and I don't doubt that is true. So what do you imagine was the most prevalent in the previous year? So people reported in the previous year this was the most prevalent thing that happened. More of them reported it than not, and more people reported that this happened in their lifetime than not. And the answer would be some sort of anxiety disorder. And we will get to this chapter, in the coming days. We'll cover anxiety. The second most common category was mood disorder, which is where bipolar and depression, things like that would be. Third most common was impulse control related, which is where ADHD or some other sort of impulse concerns fall. And then fourth most common, substance abuse related. So 1 in 4 of these people were reporting some of these over the past year and in their lifetime. The study determined that 1 in 2 people at some point in their life will have a psychological disorder. And we'll talk more about what all falls under psychological disorders. That may be a little high, but those numbers are there. The majority of these will happen to people before the age of 24. And one concerning thing was that over half of the 9,000 people who responded did not receive any treatment for any concerns. They were not under any counseling or psychologist or doctor's care looking at these mental health issues. Maybe they didn't have any, but even if they did, a sizable number were not seeking care for a variety of reasons, and that's often a concern.